Welcome, everyone. Settle in and get cozy. Today, we're diving into a really grand, beautiful story, and it's a special one from the Bible Project. I want you to just listen and imagine along with me. This isn't just any ordinary bedtime tale. It's literally the very first story of a family. It's a story about the choices we all make, and most importantly, it's about a love that never, ever gives up on us, no matter what happens.
So, to really get to the heart of this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever broken your absolute favorite toy? Just think about that for a second. Do you remember that heavy, super sad feeling in your tummy, like it was completely ruined forever and you'd never get to play with it again? Hold on to that feeling for just a moment, because today our story is all about how God lovingly fixes our broken world, much like a gentle, patient parent sitting down quietly at the kitchen table to carefully glue that beloved toy right back together.
This story actually kicks off with a really ancient Hebrew word, rashid. Now, this simply translates to beginning, but historically, it held a much deeper, richer meaning. See, it wasn't just the start of a clock ticking. It meant a preliminary period, the very starting point of a huge, beautiful promise that was about to unfold. It is literally the perfect word to set the stage for the very first page of our world's history in the book of Genesis.
Right at the start, the world wasn't exactly a place you'd want to go outside and play. It was a dark, scary, watery chaos, just crashing waves and deep shadows. It felt completely empty and wild. But God didn't leave it that way. With just his powerful voice, he totally transformed that scary, stormy chaos into a bright, colorful, beautiful garden of peace. I mean, imagine the greenest grass you've ever felt on your bare feet, the tallest, strongest trees, and the absolute sweetest smelling flowers. It was a perfectly safe place, designed from the ground up for humans to flourish, grow, and be perfectly happy.
And God was so pleased with this beautiful garden. He looked around at everything he'd just made, the sparkling, cool rivers, the leaping animals, the bright, warm sun, and he says it is good 7 different times. That number 7 is a super powerful symbol in our story. It shows us just how much perfect care, deep love, and wonderful detail he poured into making this a safe, wonderful home for us. Now, right in the middle of this incredible garden, we meet the very first people. And their names actually hold a beautiful secret meaning. Adam means humanity, and Eve means life. So they aren't just characters in an old book. They actually represent all of us. They were created to be like living mirrors. Their entire purpose was to reflect God's love, his boundless creativity, and his goodness out into the spectacular world he'd just made.
But here is where the story gets just a little bit tricky, because true love means having a choice. You can't force someone to love you, right? So God gave them a really special choice by placing a tree right in the middle of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this brings up a huge question for them, and really for us too. Will humans trust God to tell them what is good and what is bad, or will they try to make up their own rules? At the end of the day, it all absolutely comes down to trust.
Well, sadly, Adam and Eve chose to make their own rules instead of trusting God's perfect wisdom. And when they did this, they let something called sin into the world. You can kind of think of sin a lot like fast-growing prickly weeds. Before you even realize it, those dark, thorny vines start creeping in, choking the beautiful, healthy garden, ruining the quiet peace, and just making everything tangled, sharp, and messy.
Because humans are honestly pretty bad at making up the rules without God's loving help, things quickly spiraled out of control. Adam and Eve hid from each other in shame, trying to cover themselves up. Then their son, Cain, let this terrible, dark jealousy grow in his heart against his own brother. And later on, a man named Lamech actually bragged about being violent and hurting people. The world filled up with so much sadness and pain that it absolutely broke God's heart. And this deep, profound grief led to the flood. Not just out of anger, but out of a desperate desire to wash the world clean and protect the little bit of goodness that was still left. But even after the floodwaters went away, people still struggled. Instead of trusting God, they all gathered together and tried to build this giant towering structure called the Tower of Babel. And they built it purely out of pride, just to make a name for themselves and show how great they were, which of course only led to confusion and terrible chaos. But God's ultimate dream for us is always unity and peace. So, out of pure mercy, he scattered the people all over the earth to stop their pride and tragedy from spreading any further.
Okay, now here is the absolute most important part of our story to remember. Even when humans make a giant, terrible mess of things, God never gives up. He doesn't just toss the broken toy away in the trash. Instead, exactly like a loving parent, he immediately starts a rescue plan. He gets right to work,
carefully and lovingly putting the little pieces back together, doing whatever it takes to restore us back to the peace of that garden.
To kick off this amazing rescue plan, God chose one specific family to work through, Abraham's family. He promised to use them to bless every single person on the entire earth. But the reality was pretty surprising. God's promise was perfect, but Abraham's family, they made a whole lot of mistakes. They struggled with deep jealousy, lying, and stealing. Like Abraham's grandson Jacob actually tricked his own blind father to steal a blessing. They were far from perfect, but God lovingly chose them anyway.
Generations later, the story takes a very dark and scary turn. Abraham's great-grandsons became intensely jealous of their younger brother, Joseph. Now, Joseph had received this beautiful, colorful dream coat from their father. And the older brother's jealousy grew so big and so ugly that they did something truly terrible. They actually grabbed their own little brother and sold him away to be a slave in a faraway, strange land called Egypt.
I want you to stop and think about this for a second. Really put yourself right in Joseph's shoes. How can you show kindness when someone is being really, really mean to you? When Joseph's brothers were so incredibly cruel, it really makes us wonder how we should act when others hurt us. When our feelings are hurt, are we going to choose anger and try to get revenge, or will we choose the much harder, more beautiful path of forgiveness? Well, over many long years, God was doing something totally miraculous in the background of Joseph's life. At first, Joseph was just a lowly slave. Then things seemed to get even worse when he was unfairly thrown into a dark, lonely, cold prison cell. But God was always with him. The amazing turning point came when God helped Joseph interpret some confusing dreams. And miraculously, Joseph was lifted straight out of prison to become second in command of all of Egypt. And when a terrible famine struck and there was no food anywhere, Joseph actually ended up saving his very own brothers, the exact ones who sold him, from starving. God took him from a hopeless prison just to save the very people who hurt him.
And when Joseph finally revealed who he was to his terrified brothers, he didn't yell, he didn't punish them or throw them in jail. Instead, he said the most beautiful words in the whole story. He looked at them with tears in his eyes and said, "You planned this for evil, but God planned it for good to save people's lives." This is exactly how God works. He takes human evil, the very worst things we do, and completely transforms it into something incredibly good. So as we look back over this whole grand story, we see an amazing, beautiful pattern. Human failure is always met with God's divine rescue. No matter how many times humans fail, or act selfishly, or make a complete mess of the garden, God always keeps his promise. He constantly steps in to save us, to bless us, and to lovingly turn our biggest mistakes into a clear path for deep healing and peace.
Knowing that God can take any evil and turn it into something good, will you trust his promises? Will you hold on to hope when things get really hard? As we close our storybook for today, I want you to remember this one thing. Even when our world feels exactly like a completely broken toy, there is always hope. Because God is always at work fixing it, and he loves you far too much to ever give up.